mentioned you had family gatherings. Can you expand maybe a little bit like what it was like for those that were around you,
Mm,
like your parents and your sisters?
absolutely. My parents initially with diagnosis were very thrown off. There was no genetic testing at that time that could have told them, oh, by the way, you're both a carrier. So it was surprising. There's no one in their family who immediately has PKU. So I think the initial response was obviously very scared, fearful for the future because I was the first baby for them. And after they had three losses prior to me, so it was it was a big shock. And when that phone call came in, my mom had actually been nursing me, and they said you need to stop what you're doing immediately, and you could be harming the baby. So that's terrifying. Um, so I think that initial information, especially for my mom, was very difficult. And until I started growing normally and meeting all those milestones, and she realized PKU was really dietary and a lifestyle, um, it took a bit. It took a bit to feel safe and to feel confident that PKU was something they could manage. I think my dad adapted maybe a little quicker in infancy, and then both of them again, after I was really meeting milestones and growing up healthy, they did this 180 and suddenly that fear somewhat dissipated and it was replaced with, we've got this. And they were initially told, don't have any more children because you could have easily have another PKU baby. And kind of with that, oh, we've got this was when they decided we're going to have more children. Um, so it really went from kind of this roller coaster of climbing fear. Oh, here we go. And we were all just kind of in it for the ride at that point. And then my sisters, when they came along, they're both younger than I am, but to an extent, they each took on different roles of protector in their own right. My middle sister, Catherine, actually told my elderly neighbors that I couldn't have peanut butter candy and to get me something else at Halloween. So um, she, she must have been about 6 years old, and I was of the mindset of it's okay, we'll trade candy at home. It's fine. So, oh, it's fine. But um, they always have that kind of protective layer. And then my youngest sister, I think it influenced her immensely because she went into pediatric nursing and actually went and worked abroad in the Philippines and was able to perform some newborn screenings. And she came back elated that she had had that opportunity. She actually served as the primary contact for the hospital in Oklahoma when I was part of a medical trial. And she had check-ins with them, I think, every other week. So big phone calls with immense amounts of questions. And she attended the National PKU Association conference with me in 2022, where I was one of the public speakers on behalf of BioMarin Pharmaceutical. So my youngest sister is very immersed. My middle sister has a background in science, and I like to think I contributed to that a little bit, but that might be a little egocentric. So, but each of them in their own right, I think I was very fortunate. Everyone was very accepting, and there was never any special attention per se. We operated as a family, and Kristin just has different needs as far as a medical diet. So my immediate family was great. My friends were very accepting as well. I didn't have, unlike some with PKU who do experience some pushback and difficult circumstances, I didn't experience that. And I think that's because from the very beginning, we were very open about PKU, and I was taught to be an open book as well.
I want to go back when you were taking those supplements. Your insurance covered it, but I believe you were telling me a story about your dad and insurance, and I was wondering if you could share that.
Absolutely. Because PKU is medical food and a medical formula, many insurance companies to this day give a great amount of pushback because they don't want to provide funding for medical food and a medical drink because that's not technically to them a prescription. So we had a great deal of pushback at one point in my childhood, and my father actually wrote a letter to one of our then senators and essentially laid out the facts and laid out the vital need that the medical formula played in my life. And through that senator and through kind of some persuasion on his end and what he calls the power of the pen, he actually ended up getting full coverage again for my medical formula. And that was what we were receiving pushback on, was the medical drink. So it's a crazy ride, but I think through that experience and his sharing it, I actually learned how to be an advocate for myself at a very young age. And it causes you to grow up a little quickly, but
Mhm.
it's obviously very necessary, and it has served me very well in managing PKU.
So what is the financial impact of having this?
The typical individual family with even one child with PKU is looking at out-of-pocket costs for medical food. And again, those are provided through various companies. One of them would be Cambric Foods, which is it's a very big one. So if someone's placing an order with Cambric Foods, they are, depending what their needs are. I mentioned my low protein bread and that I consumed so much low protein bread. One loaf of that bread ran $12. So if we're ordering enough bread for, say, even 2 weeks, I mean, it's a massive amount out of pocket, let
Mhm.
alone you have different options through Cambric Foods and other companies, Dietary Specialties, PKU Perspectives are a couple others who provide those medical foods. And I think an individual family with one child, I mean, food alone could be looking at over $500 a month. And then if they're not receiving insurance coverage for medical formula, that presents a greater issue, because then you're experiencing what we had a taste of. And we've fought insurance companies, and thankfully, I think for the most part, always come out receiving what we needed. There was a point that I know, and that was back in the 90s, my parents were paying over $900 a month for my medical formula when there was a lapse in insurance, and they were giving us some grief. So if that was back in the 90s, I can't fathom what it would be now,
Mhm.
paying for your medical formula out of pocket. And thankfully, I haven't been in that position as an adult, but for an individual family with just one child, and there are many families who have 2, 3 children with PKU, because it can go from child to child, and at that point, you're in the thousands for what you're paying out of pocket a month for medical foods. And we've gotten into a really positive place too with gluten-free, because gluten-free tends to be lower in protein, and that is more readily available in stores, but it's still not the primary for PKU, because that low phenylalanine is so pivotal.
Okay. Have you ran into like any social issues having PKU?
Ironically for myself, no. I had in middle school, I had one classmate who gave grief about the way my medical formula smelled. And it smells terrible across the board, no matter which one you're on. So I won't even sugarcoat that. It smells horrific, but we, those of us with PKU tend to gravitate toward our medical formula, and we like it. But that would have been the only, I think, major social issue. My classmates' parents always prepared special food for me, had options that I could have. So I was very fortunate in that sense. People really stepped up to the plate in my circumstance. I do know people who have far more social issues with it than I experienced. And those can range from, bullying over the smell of the medical formula, um, kind of, I've heard of people being called a rabbit because we have to eat so many vegetables, and there's nothing but really plants and medical food in our diet, or at the time that I was on that diet. So it ranges from person to person. It's as individual, I think, as our phenylalanine allotments are. So I just happen to be on the positive end of that.